19th Street, and you know, for to give me training, there used to be a rabbi named, a teacher called Rockowitz, and I always remember we used to be down in the alley, you know, at the house. He'd come down the alley and he started teaching me Hebrew, you know. I mean, not a daven and all that. He was a nice man, and
He wasn't teaching you in the alley.
yeah. The other thing is that the neighborhood was you know, mostly Jewish, and there were some Gentiles and Italians, and they were always very nice. And we used to play with their kids, and we just had respect. Everybody never went place, any place. They just, you know, everything was visiting. You know, like I remember when I was about 8, 9, we used to sit on the curb at Clark Street, you know, and just talk. That was who we had. And I remember the first little car we made. We used the old orange crates, you know, with the big. I remember that was the motor of the car, and we'd get skate wheels on them and have two handles with you know, ropes on the skate wheels, and we want to turn them, we turn them, and it was just one of those days. Everybody lived without expectations more than to eat and to live decently. That's my opinion of it. And you know, as kids, I remember all the kids have practically all gone now. And I remember we went to Kellam School, and that was a melting pot of people to come over from Europe, and the kids would come, and teachers couldn't understand them, but I understood well, and I used to be like an interpreter at Kellam School for the teachers they couldn't understand. I remember that the teachers, a lot of them were, you know, non-Jewish teachers, I think, but they were very friendly and very helpful, you know. But you get a mean guy, they were pretty rough. The principal was E.D. Gibson. Do you remember that? And I remember that if they couldn't control him, E.D. Gibson would call him down the office and lean him over his desk and take a paddle. Take a paddle, and I remember you could hear the noise, and the colored kids that were in the class, they'd holler out, and E.D. Gibson, he said, that's the Board of Education. The board too. Yeah. Then I remember Kellam was all neighborhood, and I would say about maybe 15% were non-Jews, and I'd say the colored people must have been about 20%, and we were about the rest of it. And we just, I remember we used to go through on a playground to go to Kellam. You went to Kellam, did you? And I remember that, you know, like when we played soccer and all that, you know, it was all, the fields were all full glass and everything. How he came through those, I don't know. So there, I don't know. There's so much of the story I can't remember part of it. But those are the main things I remember. I remember the people. That was the people would come for social. They'd come to the house and visit each other. And I remember, I always remember there was one guy was Lockoff. He was a teacher, and then he went to work for a paper company just to call on the Jewish stores. So, woke up, I remember when we started to have the cows, and we used to have the guy to come. My mother milked the cows. My dad never milked cows. We only had, when I'm talking about cows, I'm talking about, we had one lot at times, and we had two at times. And the milk, my mother milked the cows, and we used to give those that in the neighborhood, we used to laugh. You know, they complained to the city about cows being there, just maybe to make noise. But we used to laugh because those people that complained at the city, that they were the ones who were helping giving milk to. And then I remember where, always remember in the neighborhood, people were fighting to eat, they didn't have any money. And I remember my mother used to call the Spar, the grocery man on Clark Street, and she would have him early in the morning deliver groceries, let them on a porch to their house. They never knew where it came from. Some of them found out. So, and then we'd get Meshuloffs, that's the people who would come around to collect for a charity, and we got to know them pretty good, but some of them, the main thing we know were just making off and getting money. They're supposed to give it to charities. So we got to know those. And so as a kid, I remember I said, Mama, how can you give them money? They're cheating. So, I remember she started to laugh. And so she'd say, well, look, if we didn't help them, how are they going to eat? They used to come in all the time. When people used to fake and all that, she didn't have it against them. She always felt sorry and needed help. And I remember people would come to the back door and just ask for food. We'd give them food. I remember they'd come from all over. And another thing is I always remember the Shamus of the Bethlehem Shul, Mendelssohn. You remember that? And on a Friday night, sometimes we'd have 3 and 4, people would come to the city, and they would need no place to sleep. So Mendelssohn always said, okay, we'll always called our house. We never refused anybody for a Friday night, And so I always remember something funny about some of them. They used to sit to my dad, always next to my dad when we had company, when we took him in. And my dad used to fall asleep. If those that didn't know anything, they talk about the Chumash and all that. They didn't know anything. But those that did, then he was awake and discussed the laws and everything else. But I remember when they come, they'd be sitting next to my dad, and they would you know, ready to eat. They were hungry. But I always remember one thing. I forget which one of my sisters, hospital there, would do. I'd take turns to serve from the kitchen to the table, and they would. I remember she always sat down first in front of them, what we call the visitors. But always one thing is funny. She set a whole plate, you know, of beans, you know, so everybody would take it around there. And I remember she set it in front of this guy, and he picks up the spoon and starts to eat out of there. Then he said in Yiddish, he said, "I don't think I could eat all of these." Oh, we had. Then one time Mendelssohn called, another Friday night. There's a chazan that comes through town. They'd stop and try to sing at a synagogue and maybe they'd collect money. And I think it was Ruthie went to the door to let him in, and he came in, a big tall fellow from Africa, and he says, "Good Shabbos," you know, and I'll tell you, it was really something, you know. He was afraid. I know he was afraid, you know, to tell us he was colored, and then he was so learned. He was terrific. He was really well known about the Chumash, and then I remember the next Saturday, you know, I always go to shul with my dad on 19th and Bird, and the next he sang in synagogue. You know, he was a chazan, and he didn't have such a hot voice, but people pitched in to pay him and to keep him and to eat, you know. But there were so many, and then there's so many things you couldn't talk about it for. But I remember in the Depression, in the early 30s, and I remember people from New York, they couldn't get jobs. They would take the family in a car, and they'd get as far as, you know, certain cities, and they asked for money, and the Jewish people would put it in and help them. And I remember they'd come, and my mother used to fill their car with gasoline, give money for gasoline, money for eating to go on to the way. And one thing, when Dorothy and I, on a honeymoon in California, you remember that? We went to a Jewish delicatessen.
In Los Angeles.
Huh?
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, we went to Los Angeles for our honeymoon at that. So we went in Boyle Heights, this chazan. I mean, the proprietor of it owned it. And you know, like all those days, you come in and sit down, they want to know, where you're from. Always want to know where you're from and what you're doing. So he said, Omaha, Nebraska. He said, Omaha, Nebraska. We want to know, how do you say, we want to know if we knew a little old lady in Omaha by the name of Rikus. Remember that?
Yeah.
And when I told him that we were Rikus, oh, remember, he couldn't do enough for us.
Nice.
He could not do, he wouldn't even charge us, you know, for the food. And, you know, I remember all those things. You go back and forth. There's so much.
That was because your mother helped him get to California.
Huh?
That was because your mother helped him and his family get to California.
He said he needed so much help, and she helped him as he come through Omaha. That was many people did that. Now, I'm not talking about one. Every day there was one coming to the house.
Well, not every day, but anyhow. Not every day, but plenty.
Practically. Well, anyway, that's it was just a good neighborhood.
You have a lot of fond memories from 19th Street.
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up. That's memory was.
We were telling Ben about the characters.
Oh, we had characters.
The guys you used to play ball with all the time.
Huh?
The guys you used to play ball with all the time.
Yeah, they were characters. But then the thing was interesting. The guy that always helped clean the barn, you know, with the cows in there, and we used to call him Caduchus. And that's what we referred to him as Caduchus. And he used to put on a show for us. You know, you just give him a little cash, nothing like that.
A little change.
But he always keep his money in his mouth. And we'd say, he put a show on for us and say, Caduchus, spit out a nickel. Boom, right in his arm, there'd go, you know, dimes and all quarters. Oh, it was really funny. But they were, you know, people were grateful to just to live and eat. That's it. So, you know, there's much to go on and on in the interest of the public.
Those were happy times, though, weren't they?
Oh, they were happy times. I remember a big, on a Saturday, you know, we couldn't ride or anything. And so I remember my sister Ethel and I would go to the Empress Theater. Do you remember that? Downtown. And we would walk, you know, and watch the show. It was a live show, you know. And then we'd, the big day was, then we'd come home, of course, walk. But for a nickel, we'd get an ice cream cone. That was Saturday afternoon. And that was a big thing for us. That was a big day. But you know, I was younger, and Ethel used to take me by the hand and go to take me show because I enjoyed it so much. Well, she did too. Well, that's about it. I could go on and on.
Tell them about going to the circus, sneaking into the circus.
Huh? Oh, well, you know, the circus were on the showgrounds. Do you remember that? And what we'd do, you know, the people that wanted to come down to the circus was on the showgrounds. And, you know, the circus was a traveling, you know, they'd stay there maybe 2 days, and the railroad used to take them, and all the animals they take out of the cage and bring them right back to the house, you know, to set up this thing. And that was what we used to do, you know. The showgrounds was right off of, on 22nd, right off of Burt. And what we would do is, you know, at that time we'd call them the rich people would come down to take their kids to the circus. And what we used to do, as soon as they drive up, we'd say, where they park the car, we'd say, you know, on a certain, we would watch their car from them because they're afraid people would steal something out of the car or what. And we take turns. I know what we'd do. We'd see them come. We may be watching 3 or 4 cars. We'd see them come. We'd run out and sit on it just like we did. Only took care of their car. And then if we got a quarter, that was a lot of money for us. And we kid around, and that's it, there's many things.
How about the Greek wrestlers?
Huh?
How about the Greek wrestlers? The Greek wrestlers in the circus.
Oh, yeah, what they do is, they ride out in the circus, they would have these little Greek, we call them little Greek wrestlers that, came with the circus. And I remember on a Saturday night, they would they would come out and say that, they would do the sock in these little, they said, they'd get the farmers would come to the circus and they'd get him on a stage there and they'd say, this man wants to wrestle me, and if he wins, he gets whatever the take was. And they'd always say that they'd get some farmer or somebody that was, came in and they got him to say, if they'd say in broken English, they say, if this man wants to wrestle me, and if he wins, if he loses, he gets abuse and character, there were characters, but that's about it.
No, come on.
Abuse.
More than abuse.
Huh?
It was more than abuse. Got experience. What else was it?
Yeah.
Abuse.
Yeah, he'd say these men, if they lose, they get experience, abuse, and exercise.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember what I say. Well, I think.
Tell about, in high school you started working in the business even and setting up branches.
Working a business, all of us, we washed bottles when I was 7-year-old in the basement. My mother and we used to have just, the neighbors come in and sometimes help us wash the bottles.
With BBs.
And
Wasn't it with BBs?
huh?
Didn't you put BBs in the bottles?
Yeah, how we wash the bottles. Those days people reused the bottles. And people would pick up bottles in the alley and bring it to us, and I don't remember how much we'd give them, for each bottle, if it was good. And we used to put, when we had to wash them in a wash tub in the basement of our house, because where we kept the bottles was in a shed right next to that. And the way we clean them, we used to take BBs and shake them to get the stains out of the bottles. And then I remember one of the neighbors, Jewish neighbors from the country, I remember we used to laugh, we'd soup the bottles, tub with water. He went to pick them up like he was fishing or something. Oh, I can't describe it. On and on. But I remember how the Jewish boys became gamblers. They could not get a job, and they started, playing. They started. I know they used to go around like the Brandeis store at the horse races was big, and they'd say they would the girls that worked in the stores when people worked like at Brandeis, they'd go down there, and they say on this race on Saturday it was, we got a winner, and if you would win, you'll get so much money. And they'd pick a horse, that they knew wouldn't win, and they'd keep the money. They didn't even bet the horse. So, they did all that. They sold it in downtown. People were sold on each corner, and I remember that the kids would have corners there, and no one would horn in on them. You know, they used to, what, and you know when especially like when they graduated high school, like graduating university. When they graduated, that they would go down to get a job. That time, remember, in this big, in the stores, and the businesses, and those that were, would hire people. Otherwise, it was a family outside. But they would come out, I remember, say, are you Jewish? Yeah. Well, we don't hire Jews. I know that. They come out and say there was no law against anything else. And sometimes, if some of them could get by, they would say they weren't. That always stuck in my mind more than anything else. And I just always remember, we had respect for Creighton University and, the family, our family, because Phil Klutznick, he was, he went to Creighton and he lived at Weiner's house on Burt Street. Had a little room on the second floor. But when the Jewish people from New York would apply for medical school, they got in, if they were good enough. They got in. There wasn't any, glad to help them. Where, any place else was prejudiced. And Phil Klutznick always said, that's what made him so much, for the University of Creighton. He did a lot of things for him. He said it wasn't what they did for me or anything. It was what they did for the medical school. So, I don't want to talk anymore.
Wow.
The Jewish students are right. My dad owned a clothing store, and that's where the Neon Goose restaurant finally was. That was his clothing store. And at that time, the two railroad stations were right across the street. The Union Station, the Pacific, Burlington. And on the corner, about a half a block away, was a streetcar barn. So my dad's trade was more conductors and people like that were working on the railroad or on the streetcar. Anyway, we lived behind the store. And my first 5 years of my life. My mother had a big wash tub that she used to wash us kids in during the week. But on the weekend, my dad used to rent a room at the Pullman Hotel. It was right across the street. And we would all go over there, take a bath and wash our hair, and it all cleaned up. That was every Saturday night. That was our little jaunt. Anyway, it was I can't say it was easy or hard living behind the store. My mother probably could say it was very hard, but as a child, it wasn't hard for me. Anyway, what else can I tell you about that? When we moved away from there, we moved into a little house on 34th and Howard. And I went to kindergarten at Columbian School. And I went half a day in the morning. I'd come home, and my mother had my dad's lunch all packed. and she would take me to the streetcar on 33rd and Farnham, and I'd get on the streetcar with my dad's lunch, and the streetcar used to take me to right in front of my dad's store. The conductor would clang the clang and the bell, and my dad used to come out and get me off the streetcar, and I spent the rest of the day with my dad at the store. And then we'd come home at night. So I don't know how many 5-year-olds today would get on a streetcar all by themselves. But at that time, that wasn't unusual, I guess. I don't know. But everybody knew my dad and my mom, and that was the way we lived. We lived in this little
Well,
house.
tell them about
We
you and
had-
Sydney selling newspapers in front of the.
Oh yeah, my brother sold newspapers at the Burlington station. But he liked to take me along because, you know, a little girl yelling extra, extra, her newspaper, sold a lot more newspapers than he did. He was older than me. So he got rid of his newspapers a lot faster if I came along. So that's what we did. But anyhow, I had a happy childhood. I really did. I don't know, just worked out that way. I think it was a little rough on my sister. She didn't like living behind the store because she was in high school, and she just didn't think that was, you know, the same as her friends. So we moved to this little house, and then she was happier.
How did you and Henry meet?
How did Henry and I meet?
Well, I was close friends with her brother Sidney.
Yeah, they were fraternity brothers, and Sidney used to bring Henry home all the time. And I would think I was about 13 years old at that time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He was a terrible tease, and I didn't like him at all. I really didn't. But
It worked out okay, though, didn't it?
eventually,
Okay.
in spite of my not liking him, I did a lot of things to irritate him, or I thought I was irritating him. But anyhow, it worked out all right. I began to like him. Yeah.
Well, you know, what little her dad had, he lost it in the stock market,
Yeah, in 1929.
1929. And they had a struggle from then on. When she graduated high school, she wanted to go to university. They didn't have money to send her to university. But what happened was after we got married, you know, and kids already, you know, Steve and Carl and Nancy, you know, so got a little older, where she didn't have to pay them and all that. She went ahead, and that's when she worked at the stores. Then we got married,
No,
and we could
I
afford.
worked in the stores before we got married, not after we got
well,
married.
she worked, yes. Yeah, I mean you did, yeah.
I worked when I was in high school.
Before.
Stuart Galinsky hired me when I was a freshman in high school, and I was too young to be out in the front of the store, you know, as a clerk. So he always had me in the back room, marking tickets and so forth and so on. That was my first job. I worked there every Saturday and after school a lot of the time. Anyhow, one time he was having a sale, and he needed another sales girl. He says, "Come on out in front and help me." So I came out in front, and this woman had the hat on backwards, and she loved it. And I wasn't going to tell her, so I sold her the hat. But then she loved it backwards, not right. So that was okay. Another time I was working for Nebraska Clothing. Must be the time Steve was referring to. And they had a sale there, and some woman came up to me with several hats that she wanted to buy. And I wrote up the ticket, and she says I wasn't going to give that, the woman that had waited on her to begin with, she said I wasn't going to give that kike the business. So I wrote up the sale, and I gave her her hats, I gave her her ticket, and I says, this kike, thanks you very much. And that was it. But I apparently, people didn't take me for a Jewish person. So I was always getting little side remarks and little digs about Jews here and Jews there. But somehow I seemed to overcome that, kind of had a dig back. So anyhow, I don't know, Henry and I just, I was saying about how when I got to be 18, he started taking me out.
Yeah.
Before that, he wouldn't rob the cradle. And he was always teasing me if I didn't have a date. So one day he said, how come you don't have a date? And I said, I don't have a date. So he said, would you like to go to the movie? And I thought, oh, sure, why not? So I went to the movie with him, but he didn't want to take me to the Jack and Jill where all the kids hung out at that time. And he says, you don't want anything to eat, do you? And I said, sure I do. So he said, where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go to Jack and Jill. I think he was terribly embarrassed, but he did take me. And then eventually he got over it.
That's where everybody went to go to. Do you remember the Jack and Jill? Yeah, that was. But anyway, I tried to tell you about her. How we were married while the kids were growing. Then she started just take courses at the University of Omaha. At that time, it was just, I think there was just that one building there, and she would just read the courses,
No, I didn't just read the courses. I audited them because
she audited.
Because I didn't have the prerequisites to take certain courses, and I wanted to take courses I wanted to take, not the courses that they would demand for a degree or this or that or the next thing, because I never expected to go to school so long. Well, I ended up going for 10 years. I easily could have gotten a degree, but I wasted all that time. I guess it wasn't really a waste, because whatever you learn, and for nobody but yourself. It doesn't matter to anybody else if I had a degree or not. So I benefited a lot, and it wouldn't matter to anybody anyway, whether I got a degree or not. Oh, that's Emily. So, but this is how we became engaged. Henry and I went down, it was a Sunday, and we went down to pick up my dad, see if he couldn't bring him home a little earlier to have dinner. So while we were waiting for him to close up and get ready, Henry's looking in the showcase there, and he says, how much would a ring cost? And so my dad said to him, well, it depends on what kind of a ring. but I think you're talking about a ring for my daughter. And Henry said, I guess so. And then we were engaged. We came home and told everybody we were engaged, and that was it. My dad
That's
kind of connived that into him, right? My dad kind of,
Yeah,
He probably just smoothed the way is what he did.
right, he sure did. He made it easy for him. And she was so sweet. She really was an angel of a woman. And she said, I want you to come, I'd like you to come for dinner on Friday night. But Henry was very shy, and he wasn't quite ready to introduce me to his whole mishpacha, his whole family. So he said, oh no, I don't think she can come, she's busy. But I said, sure I can. I'll make a time to come. So I came. And I met all of his sisters and brothers, and they were all lovely.
And you lived.
Carl, can you tell us a little bit about the Rikus and the Shate family and your own family?
Well, I can, and as I've been sitting here listening, there's many fond memories that come to mind. But I think that the most important thing is how close the families were, and I'm talking about growing up in the late 50s and the early 60s. We had lots of family here, lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, and everyone was extremely close-knit group. We were always together many times during the year. We always had our Shabbat dinners, and we always had a big crowd. And I remember the Passover seders with lots and lots of people. So it was really a good experience. Of course, I was the youngest child, and also I was the youngest cousin of many cousins. So I got picked on a lot, but I always lived by the motto, don't get mad, get even. So I became known as sort of the prankster, and I always got in the last laugh, so to speak. But it was a lot of fun, and as I said before, we were always very close with not only my brother and sister, but all of our many first cousins and aunts and uncles that were in Omaha at the time. And it was a good time to as a teenager growing up in Omaha. I remember how strong the youth council was, how strong BBYO was, in AZA. I think we had in the early 60s we had 4 boys chapters and at least 2 or 3 girls chapters. And it was, and we, of course, all the Jewish kids went to Central High, or at least 90% of us did, and the Jewish Community Center being across the street became the social focal point of life, and so every day after school we would meet there for social interaction, and it was really a very fun time. I remember my mother had said at my first day of high school, I remember how nervous and scared I was to go down to Central High School, and my mother said that don't worry about it. These next 4 years will be the most fun of your life, and I think it turned out to be true. It was really a great experience, and a lot of fun. I have many fond memories of that period, and also the period of the Rikus family and how close knit everyone was, and it was a great time.
Carl, tell me a little bit about your own family.
Well, I have a wife and 3 daughters. My wife's name is Adrienne Zoe, and everybody calls her Zoe. And I have 3 daughters, Stacy, Karen, and Rachel. Stacy got married 3 years ago, and to a boy named Brett Atlas from Chicago, and they live in Chicago. And my middle daughter, Karen, is in law school in Chicago, in her 2nd year of law school, and my youngest daughter is in her 3rd year of college. So they're growing up fast, and they're just great girls.
Carl, you were the president of AZA, weren't you, 100?
Yes, I was.
Named after an uncle.
Right, I was the president of AZA 100, and was quite active, involved in regionally and locally, and of course I had a lot of pride because it was named after my uncle Sam Bieber, and it was, as I said before, it was just a great experience, and the friends that you made in those years became your friends for life, and so it was a terrific time.
And then you got involved in the family business.
And then I got involved in the family business. I always worked summers at S. Rikus and Sons, doing warehouse work, and
Tell about the Tom Sawyer incident.
I don't remember that one.
cleaning out the back room for Uncle
Oh
Book.
well, you don't really want me to tell
Yeah,
that
that's
story.
right.
Well, I think I was 16 or 17 years old at the time, and our office was 29th and Cumming Street, and it had a very dark, dingy, moist basement in that building, and where all the old records were kept for the company for years, and just general junk was down there, was for what you could see. And I remember during the summer, my uncle said that he gave me a task of cleaning it out. And I looked at this, and I said, there's got to be an easy way to do this. And along came a couple of guys who happened to be walking by the building, and I said, how would you guys like to earn some extra money? And so basically what it came down to was I subcontracted the job of cleaning out the basement, and supervised the activities of these 2 young men who just came strolling by the building. I guess that was part of the learning experience of acquiring some entrepreneurial ability.
Did your uncle ever find out about this?
I don't know if he ever did or not. But the basement did get clean, and so it worked out fine. But we had a lot of fun working in the family business, and every once in a while we'd bring our friends down if there was a special job that needed to be done. And of course, there were times when you worked awfully hard, particularly loading and unloading trucks, and doing some of those things. I remember one incident where we would sell beverage bottles to the R.C. Cola Company, which was Max Platt's company down on 24th coming, and I think I was 17, and they needed help to unload this truckload of beverage bottles in the middle of a hot summer, July. And Max Platt would always be on his forklift truck with a big cigar, and I went over there with the truck driver to unload the truck, and Max said to the driver, "Well, where's your help? We got to get this unloaded." And the driver pointed to me and said, "There he is." And I thought the cigar was going to drop out of Max's mouth. He says, "You got to be kidding! This kid's we got to get this done. I got a business." He said, "No, we're going to get it done for you." And so Max said, "Okay." He says, "Your job is to load the pallet on the truck and get it all loaded up before I pick it up on my forklift, put it away, and come back and pick it up again." So I just remember never working so hard my entire life to prove to Max Platt that we could get this job done for him, and that was quite an introduction to the business world.
Carl, usually I ask a parent if there's a message they'd like to leave for their children. I'm going to turn the tables on you. Is there a message you would like to leave both for your children as well as for your parents?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess the message that I would leave to my parents is how proud I am to be their son. Of course, you can't help but experience how much how loved they are in the community, and there's really not a day that goes by that somebody doesn't say to me, "What great parents you have, and how are your parents doing, and how much they've meant to the community, and how nice they are." And that's a wonderful thing to live with, and I just hope that in some measure my children, and I know they have enjoyed that, and will continue to value that wonderful reputation that's been set by my parents and my grandparents before them. So
We're pretty proud of you too.
well,
I think you've done very well. We're very
Well,
proud of you.
it's,
He was a really kind of a spoiled little baby. He was very cute for one thing, and he was our youngest for another. And so we felt that whatever he did was all right. He grew up in spite of us to be a very fine young man. We're very proud of him. We're very proud of all of our children, really. I can honestly say that our children and our grandchildren are all nice people. And that makes us feel very good. We feel like we've contributed a little bit something to this world.
I think that we all grew up with respect and humility for other people, which is a message that our parents really instilled in us very early, and how important that is in not only social life but in the business world and so forth and so on, is that respect and humility for others, and to think, to view situations how other people would view them, and I hope that my children, I believe they have learned that. It's really such a small thing, but it's really probably one of the most important things you can qualities that you can have in your life.
Thank you, Carl.
Oh, okay. This is my dad, and this was his tailor shop on Riverside Drive in New York. And that probably was in about 1910 or somewhere around there. That was when he first went into business for himself. When he first came here, he came and was an apprentice to a tailor. And he lived in the tailor shop. And that's how he learned the business. And then finally he got a business of his own. That is Henry's football team when he was at Central High School. And he's, what did you say? He's in the second row, and he's fifth from the left. Okay. And he loved playing football. All right, this was originally a formal that I wore. A dressmaker made it for me, and I wore it to the prom or whatever. And then when I was getting married, I couldn't afford to get a wedding dress, so we bought sleeves. We didn't buy sleeves. We bought the same material, and the dressmaker put sleeves in the formal to make it a wedding dress. And the veil was my sister's veil. And that was it. That is a picture of my mother and father and my sister Sylvia, and that was before I was born. That was okay. This is the car that Henry talked about earlier that was made out of orange crates. And there he is driving the car, and that's his brother Max and his sister Ruthie standing beside him. Okay, that's my father and his brother Julius Chait, and the man sitting down is Jake, but he didn't call himself Chait, he called himself Hyatt, because when they came over to this country, the people at Ellis Island couldn't say "huh" very well, so they made him Hyatt instead of Chait. The other way around. Actually, they said Chait for my Uncle Julius and my dad, but Hyatt, they finally got that across for Uncle Jake. For that. Okay. But that was a picture taken of me when I was about 7 or 8 months old, maybe 6, I don't know. I have no idea how old I was, but about that. I don't think I was walking yet. This was a photograph taken, I really don't know for sure, but I would say in the 70s maybe. He had to have that for one of the, I think when they sold the company or something, they had to have pictures of him, so that's one of his better ones. This is my dad's store when I was telling you about when he had his business right across the street from the Union Station, the Burlington Station, and right up the street, a half a block away, was the streetcar bar. But this store eventually turned into the Neon Goose. I don't know what it is today, but that, or maybe it's still there. I don't know. Maybe. Okay, this is my mother and dad's wedding picture in New York. And after they got married, they were on their way to California to make their home there. But they stopped in Omaha, and my father wanted to see his two brothers, Julius and Jake, and they talked them into staying here rather than going on. So that's how come we ended up in Omaha. This picture here, okay, this picture was taken when we went to Chicago one time, and we heard about this photographer, and we had our picture taken, and we had Steve and Nancy and Carl's picture taken at the same time. I guess Steve must have been around 13 or 14, and Nancy about a few years younger, and Carl a few years younger than that. This is a picture of Mother and Dad Rikus. I don't know exactly when it was taken. Might have been taken at the time of their 50th wedding anniversary. This was Zeta and Bubba Rikus' 50th wedding anniversary picture. And that little baby sitting on my lap was Stephen. He was just about 6 months old at that time. And right next was Ruthie Richards, and that was Suzanne Richards Singer, standing in front of her. And that other was, next to her is Ethel, and the little boy is Tommy, and standing up next to her was Betty Lou. And then on the other side were the twins, the Bieber twins, and Barbara, and Louise and Dale. That was a picture taken when Henry's 80th birthday. And standing next to him is Steve, and on the other side of him is Carl. And the other side of Carl is Alberto, my daughter's husband. And then there's Carolina. And in front is Annie holding Eli, our great-grandson. And then's Nancy and Zoe. And there's me and Margot and Suzanne. And right above Suzanne is, oh wait a minute, no, is Kathy and Alex. And that's Daniel, Alexander's father. And there's Ari standing next to Steve. And down on the floor is Andrea. And then, I can't see too well. Is that Rachel, Stacy, and Karen? I think I got everybody.
And Alex is your other great-grandson.
Yeah, Alex is my other great-grandson. That was when he was an infant. So, I think that takes care of everybody there. All right, this is in August of 1962. And we were in a Hadassah style show. And Nancy wore the present-day bathing suit, and I wore the old-fashioned bathing suit. And that picture was on in the World Herald, on the living section. Was a great big picture, just like that. So anyhow, it was fun to do.
All right, this picture was taken at the new JCC. My dad was always an athlete, and I never was an athlete until 30 years later. So I work out at the J, and my dad still works out at the J. And somebody had a camera, and they caught the two of us and put us together. So
I love that picture.
right.
That is a good.
This picture was taken at my mother and father's 40th wedding anniversary. And sitting next to my dad is Lawrence Pollock. And on the other side is of my mother is Henry Pollock. And then there's Steve. And right above Steve is my brother-in-law Harold Pollock and my sister Sylvia. And my brother Sidney is next to her and his wife Vicky. And then there's Henry and me. And sitting on the floor is Judy, who is now Judy Pazel, and David Chait, Dr. David Chait, and then I think is Martha and Carl and Nancy and Susan. Martha and Susan and David were my brother's children, and Lawrence and Henry and Judy were my sister's children, and the rest belonged to me. And us. Okay, this picture was taken at Krug Park of my mother and dad and my sister Sylvia, my brother Sidney, and me.
Okay, that's a picture of my great-grandfather, Zusman Alexander ben Pesach Halevi Chayet. Zusman Alexander, the son
No, he wasn't.
Yes, that's the name.
Okay.
Zusman Alexander
He was
Chait.
Adrian.
No, that's not Adrian. Is that Adrian?
Sure, that's Adrian. That's my mother's father.
Oh,
That's
okay.
my mother's
I got-
father.
all right. Sorry. Well, that is Zvi Hirsch. Zvi Hirsch Adiram.
Oh, okay.
Zvi Hirsch Adiram. So I'm sorry, I got mixed up. So that's my Baba Chait's father, my
Right.
great-grandfather.
Right.
That's my great-grandmother, Hannah Riva Adiram, and she was married to Zvi Hirsch Adiram, who are my Baba Chait's parents.
Okay, and that's my mother. She came to the States when she was about 16 years old. Her father had died of cancer, and there were quite a few children. But my mother was of the age at that time where my grandmother could allow her to come and live with an aunt in New York. And she did, and they never saw each other again. This was a family reunion at Ken Somberg's bar mitzvah, and that was 2 weeks before Ruthie Richards died, his grandmother. And that's, I think, forgotten how many there were of us, but almost everybody came in for that. And that was taken at Temple Israel at the time of his bar mitzvah.
That's a picture of some of us when I got an award I got the City of Peace Award from the Israel Bonds. So there's my parents and my brother Carl, and next to him is my son Ari, and then Zoe, Carl's wife, and then my sister Nancy, and that's Andrea, isn't it?
Yep,
Yeah,
that's Andrea.
and my mother and Margot.
That was a proud moment. Right, this picture was taken at the White House when my brother-in-law Phil became Secretary of Commerce. And there we are with President Carter and whatever family could get there. It was a wonderful occasion. Very thrilling.
And this is
Right, this is also a picture taken at the White House. This is the family that went there for the swearing in of Phil when he was Secretary of Commerce. I don't know, I really don't know the date of that. But sometimes in the 1970s, I guess.
Late 70s.
Late 70s, yeah. So that's Ari there right in front of Henry. And Daniel and Nancy and I don't know who that is. I can't see it. And I'm standing next to Henry, and there's Steve and Carl and oh, and Nancy Friedman. Nancy Richards Friedman, and Suzanne and Ari. And I wish I could see who that is standing next to Nancy. Who is that, Margot? I think that must be Margot, isn't it?
I can't see that.
You can't see it either.
Whoops. Sorry. This is a correction. That's Zoe, standing below Carl and next to my daughter Suzanne, and then me and Mother, and Ari standing in front of Mother and Dad, and then Margot, and then Suzanne, and then Daniel.
That's not Suzanne, that's Nancy.
Nancy, I'm sorry, and
Nancy and then Daniel.
Daniel. All right, we got everything.